Solitaire Rose Radio, an interview with the Uncanny Omar of Near Mint Collectibles. I have to start this episode with an apology. I did this interview near the end of February, and it's just now getting up. The reason for that is work. I didn't want to rush through. I wanted to edit this and make it sound good. I wanted to make sure that everything in it was kosher and all, because Omar and I had a wonderful talk, and some of it went way out of bounds and was a little too personal for the episode. And if you have gone to his YouTube page, which there's a link in the description, he does wonderful videos about comics, and you can feel the enjoyment and excitement he has. One of the things that really bothers me about a lot of comic book podcasts, and especially on YouTube, is there are people who put out videos who seem to be mad about comics. They don't like the stuff that's coming out now. They feel the stuff coming out now isn't made just for them the way they feel it should be. Their memories about comics of the past are very tinged by nostalgia and not by fact. And there is a feeling almost from a lot of these YouTubers that they're mad at the way comics are done because they're not doing them, which is one of the problems with a lot of fandoms. A lot of fandoms have this sense of entitlement. Omar has none of this stuff. Omar, when he announces, he's kind of the official guy who announces the Marvel Omnibuses, to where he's announced stuff that's coming out in January of next year already. He works with Marvel on this, and we have a wonderful conversation explaining how he does it. But I wanted to tell kind of my Omar story. When the world went into lockdown in March of 2020, unlike a lot of people, my jobs got more busy. I was working at a group home for developmentally disabled adults, if you don't know, and we had to basically help people who are developmentally disabled often have other health issues. And they also are very, very prone to infections. When I first started working there, it was like working in a kindergarten, in that they would go to their day program, and whatever disease was floating around out in the world, they would bring it home and share it with us, because their sense of a personal bubble does not exist. I've done that training bit where you see how close your personal bubble is and how close someone gets to you before you get uncomfortable. I have a huge personal bubble, but they don't. And they also do not cover their mouth when they sneeze or cough or anything else. So a lot of staff just didn't want to work because, hey, we're going to get sick. They were also in a time when the pay wasn't that great. They have upped the pay, and now there's more people there. But it was, constant asking if I could work because we didn't have enough staff. And then the office job, I was working from home, but can you think of a time when people would have more questions about their medical coverage, about their disability coverage? Because there wasn't. And we were being given tons of overtime. We were busy, crazy busy. Meanwhile, I'm hearing about other people getting laid off and people losing their jobs and retail shutting down. And I felt bad for them, but I could not. I didn't have any of that. So I had the worst of both worlds. I was crazy busy and isolated, because as much as I like the clients at the group home, you don't really have the conversations you would have with your friends, or when you go to a comic shop, or when you go to a concert, or when you go to a coffee house, or things like that. So I looked to YouTube just to have, just to listen to people talk. It's where I found a whole bunch of different YouTubers. I found the Sorted guys who do food. Alton Brown was doing Quarantine Kitchen. And one of the ones that popped up was, hey, I'm announcing 2 omnibuses that are coming out. And I was like, oh, cool. And I clicked on it, and there was Omar in his suit. Suit up, everybody. It's time for more omnibuses. And then he would have other videos, and then he would have live videos where he would just be on chatting with comics and answering questions that people would post. And it was almost like, it's a weird thing, because it's like when you listen to DJs, there used to be this feeling when you listen to the radio that the DJ was your pal. And it was a one-way thing, but a good DJ would make you feel like he was your friend, riding in the car with you, sitting with you to talk music. And YouTube kind of fulfilled that. And I reached out to Omar and asked, after the pandemic was winding down, I asked if he'd want to do an interview. And he has tons of interviews that he's done. And if you go to his Patreon, that's one of the things he offers. And he graciously agreed, and we sat and we talked, and we lost track of time. And then when it was done, my work kind of exploded again, because they've done a reorganization at my office job. And the group home kind of was shuffling me around. So it wasn't, I knew where I was going to be. It's, nope, I'm in a house I don't know very well. Or I'm being brought in to take people to church. Or I didn't have a lot of spare time. And a little behind the curtains, it usually takes me about twice as long to edit an episode as the episode is, because I try to cut out a lot of the ums and ers and dead air and things like that. I've listened to podcasts that are more raw, and while I like them, I want mine to sound more professional, even if we aren't very professional. So I apologize to Omar, and I apologize to you. I love doing these interviews. I wish I had more time to do them. I wish I had more time like I had a few years ago when I was putting out 2 podcasts a week without stop. But instead, I have a wonderful interview with Omar. Coming out of the interview, I admire the guy. I really admire the guy, and I think after you listen to this episode, you will as well. First off, I saw your video today.
Okay.
Today you announced the fourth Thunderbolts.
Yeah. 4 Thunderbolts, that's right.
So now you also did some announcements on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And I doubt that the people at Marvel are emailing you at 2 a.m. Sunday to say, hey, here's the big announcement. Do they give you this information with NDAs and, okay, here's when you can announce it? Or is it when you get the email and you get your time to do it?
Well, any of the breaking news, I have an NDA. Things have to be approved. So it goes through a process of, as soon as I get a bunch of emails and with the dates, I can start coordinating with David and his team, David Gabriel and his team at Marvel, to start working on a schedule and getting content and covers. Sometimes I don't have everything at once, so I have to work on other videos that I have. Like they haven't chosen covers, for example, for a particular title, and I go on and work on another book, and I record that video. That video then, with the graphics, if there's nothing that they change, which happens sometimes, they change, whether last minute or whether last second, they can say, hey, as a matter of fact, we're going to change that cover, or we're going to change the content. So if everything is passed, I send it over to David. David approves it, and then it goes to legal for Disney legal to approve my videos. And then sometimes I have to change things. Sometimes I can't say things. Sometimes things have to be redone, which isn't very often, but it does happen. And that's kind of the process. And it's, like I said, it's pretty easy, changing a couple things here and there is not a big deal. But sometimes it makes it hard what I can and can't say. Like announcing the Miracle Man Omnibus, there were a set of words I could not use, which made it really difficult to get to announce a book by Alan Moore.
Yeah,
And
you can't use the
and I
word
can't
Alan
say
or more.
I can't use Alan Moore. I can't use Marvel Man. I can't use Captain Marvel Shazam family. I can't use Fawcett Comics. I can't use it was that one was a very jumping through the hurdles kind of video. Like, okay, how am I going to talk about this book and what it is and the historical significance of it if I can't use certain keywords? That one, I think that was the most challenging one that I had to do because of certain things that I couldn't say. And it makes sense from a legal standpoint. From a fan standpoint, people were in the comments like, why didn't you just say Alan Moore?
Yeah.
Like that, it's like things like that. They have no idea what's happening behind the scenes. Not that I didn't want to, it's just that the man himself decided he did not want his name on there. And there's nothing I can do about that, and legal had to step in. So
We actually did a podcast a few years ago with the legal history of Marvel Man, and by the end of it, your head is just swimming at all of the things where, because it was comics, it was okay. Well, Alan Moore just hands off the rights. Oh, then somebody bought the company, and then that gets messed up. And then the original creator comes forward and says, wait a minute, nobody ever bought the rights from me. And Des Ken went, oh, wait, yeah, I didn't do that, did I? And I imagine Disney's legal just has a headache whenever Miracle Man comes up.
Or anything with any kind of licensing.
So how did you start in comics? Because nobody starts by picking up an omnibus. They start by picking up what they can afford. In your videos, you've talked about how you're a big X-Men fan.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the secret origin of the Uncanny Omar?
My secret origin goes all the way back to Lima, Peru, and having appendicitis and having an emergency operation and being in a free children's clinic for 4 days. And my uncle sending me a care package from America, and I could not read English, but I fell in love with the pictures. And that's all she wrote. That was 1980. Oh my gosh, I think it was 1983 when that happened. So after that, I started asking him for more things, and I started looking for comics in Peru because it's all in Spanish. So that's kind of the how it began, and then we moved to America in 1987. So in order for me to learn that English language to try to make friends in school, I got a bunch of comics again, X-Men, because for some reason that I gravitated towards the X-Men. Maybe it was the pictures. I don't know. And that's how I kind of forced myself to learn to read English so I could read these stories. And then it's weird as a kid, you don't think about that period of how long it took. How long was I in during summer of 87 to 88? It helped that I had chickenpox in 87, though. I don't know if people these days will remember chickenpox or not, but we had them.
There are a lot of stories of creators and longtime fans who found comics when they were sick.
Yes.
Mark Evanier talks about getting comics when he was young because he was sick and couldn't leave the house. Even Jim Shooter, I think, has told stories about that. And it's weird how many people have that in their background. Mm-hmm. Now, in Peru, did they have Marvel, DC, things like that, or did they have sort of Peruvian comics, or a mix of both?
It was a big mix of both, but a lot of American and Japanese comics made it down there. Like anime was huge in Peru, and some of the earliest cartoons I remember watching more, well, what we used to call Japanimation, or those cartoons from Japan.
But yep, that's what we called them too, Japanimation.
Yeah,
back in the 80s.
We didn't have the term anime. I don't even remember that transition. I just remember everybody calling it anime, and I'm like, well, I guess that's what I'm gonna call it, anime. That's what it is. But seriously, I can't remember that many titles. There were a couple of Chilean comics. There were a couple of Spanish comics that would make it over. And a lot of them were anthologies that were coming over from America, whether it had Captain America or Avengers, or sometimes they were translated by a Mexican group. Sometimes they were translated by a Spanish group from Spain. And if you know, there, or maybe you don't know, but there is a difference between the Spaniard Spanish and the Mexican Spanish and
Yes.
Central American Spanish. So sometimes even those I would get lost in the translation of what are they trying to say? Like I'm trying to figure some things out that I wasn't aware of. But it wasn't until I moved to America in '87, in that summer of '87, getting chickenpox, that I kind of forced myself to learn to read it, to better enjoy these without having to make up stories in my head anymore, to see what these stories were really about without the translations. So,
And I'm older than you, but by the time we got into the late 80s, for me, the X-Men was becoming this impenetrable wall of continuity.
yeah.
How were you able to sort of get into stuff that you almost had to have a master's degree in Chris Claremont to piece out what was going on? I often tell the story of when my son was young, I once drove him out of the house by telling him Cable's origin, and he got so confused. He said, I don't want to read those comics. I'm just going to go play with my friends.
I just want to go play with my friends.
Well, he had sat down and he said, "Who's this Cable guy?"
Boy, that was the wrong question.
Yes,
How did I
was.
do it? I don't know. Maybe it was I had a clean slate, right? Why
Yeah.
would I know? Why would we didn't have the internet. We had, you had back issues, but I didn't even have a comic store near me growing up in Kentucky until a couple of years after living here. So a lot of it was just trying to fill in those puzzles. It's like, okay, it's so weird to talk about this, but you understand this.
Yeah.
Say you have a favorite TV show, favorite cartoon growing up, right?
Yeah.
Now, cartoons when we were growing up, there were mainly 1 or 2 episodes. There's hardly like a big saga unless it's like Rocky and Bullwinkle, right? Like the Big Martian saga or whatever it was. But you miss like 5 episodes. How do you go back until it comes back? Because there's no internet, there's no DVDs, there's no VHS available of these cartoons. So you have to wait for it to come back around. And that's kind of what I did. I had to fill in those blanks. Like if I missed an episode, I can't believe I'm comparing it to Rocky and Bullwinkle, but if I would have missed an episode or 10 episodes of Rocky and Bullwinkle, I would have to kind of fill in the blanks. Well, I guess this happened. Now, editor notes back then were a blessing because they did tell you, oh, that happened in Uncanny X-Men issue 158. How dare you forget? And I didn't have Uncanny X-Men 158, I don't know, for 5 years after reading 175, 176, things like that. So it was just a matter of filling in the blanks yourself and coming in with a clean slate. I didn't have any backlog. I didn't have any movies to influence me. I didn't have any TV shows or cartoons, video games, or the internet. I just had my imagination and what I thought these stories were like. And boy, I was completely off what the Brood saga was compared to what I thought in my head. When they kept talking about the Sleezoids, I'm like, what the heck did they run into out there? But yeah, I don't think about these things until you just brought it up. Like, how did I go? I think we just get by, right? Like, kids are smart enough. Kids, and I guess some adults, I don't know. Kids are smart enough to kind of fill in those blanks.
I was so lucky in the 70s because you had the modern stuff, but also Marvel was flooding the market, so they were reprinting all the Silver Age stuff.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I got that sort of double track going. And you had Roy
you were
Thomas.
Going backwards and forwards.
Yep, you had Roy Thomas, and it's almost like he would see, well, what's being reprinted the next few months? Oh, okay, I'll grab stuff from that and use it.
Mm-hmm.
So then by the 80s, everything was very different. Do you remember the first collected edition you bought?
It must have been in the late 90s. Oh, I'm sorry, late 80s. Early 90s. Must have been something that I couldn't find. I want to say it's either Batman Year 2. I know I love that story. Or it must have been Watchmen, where I couldn't find one of the issues. And because those were easily accessible in trades, and believe me, as a comic book, you can't see me, but quote unquote collector, I had snooty at the idea of getting a graphic novel or reprints. How dare you even suggest that I get a reprint of The Dark Knight Returns? I'm gonna find the original first printing if it takes me years to do it. But I mean, that was my mentality as a collector. I think most kids are like, no, I'm gonna go and find it. We didn't believe in collected editions, and now you look at me and like all I preach is collected editions because it's out there. Oh my gosh, my entire childhood is about reprinted in these big books. Almost. Still
That
have a
was
lot.
the thing. I remember when the first trade paperbacks started coming out. The first two I bought that weren't, Origins of Marvel Comics or, the Fireside books they did in the
Yeah,
70s.
those origins were they just brought the origins back in one I think a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Very
But
cool.
they did The Power of Iron Man, which was the Iron Man becoming an alcoholic story.
Oh.
And the Phoenix Saga. And
yeah, that's a popular
in my
one.
mind, everything just kind of clicked, and it's like, well, all comics should be like this. And that was in the 80s when my brain did that.
Collected in one sitting?
Yeah. To the point where I was involved in comics retail in the late 80s and early 90s. That's kind of where the podcasting comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go to the retailer events. And I swear they got sick of me saying, how long until you get collected editions of here's the Fantastic Four from 1988 all in one book, 1989 all in one book, et cetera, et cetera. They would just roll their eyes at me and go, the average fan does not want a trade paperback.
I believe that is true back then.
Yep.
Right? If you look at well, you said you were in retail? Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you remember the sales of the Marvel Masterworks and why they had such a high price point, because they weren't expected to sell that much.
But the high price point back then, $30 for a
$30 was a lot of money in 1987 and 1988 compared to what 65 cents of at the time, right? And then oh my gosh, I remember the increase to $1. My mom about lost it. I'm sure you remember the increases.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, the 75 cents to $1 was a nightmare.
I can't tell you how many of my friends in junior high, when comics went to 30 cents, said, well, I'm out.
I'm out. Yeah. And you still hear that to this day with now collected editions. Well, if an omnibus is going to be $125 to $150, I'm done. And you still hear that to this day. But I remember that big price hike because it was a big deal back then. I was like,
oh, yeah.
That's 2 lunches. I can't. That's not a lot. That's not a lunch and a half. And also, I didn't have a comic book store here where I lived in Central Kentucky until about comic book stores would come and go, but it was mainly the pharmacy, and the pharmacist would keep some of the issues for me, or it was the grocery store that would have them. And yeah, I remember the first comic book store, and I was like, because I'll be honest with you, I don't know if they still do this. Do they still do mail orders where you subscribe, like subscriptions?
They do not. I think the subscription department went away sometime in the 2000s.
Okay, because that was the other way I was getting comics with subscriptions, because I was showing my mom the math. I'm like, look, I'm basically getting 2 issues for free. That way you don't have to drive anywhere. And then there was the prestige comics that were just a little bit more than your 75 cents dollar comics. They were $1.25, $1.50. Because they had that prestige format, and they were only available through comic book stores or through subscriptions. Well, all these things we're talking about making me feel old. Chicken pox and comic book subscription.
Well, here's the thing about price hikes. As I dig into comics history, you've probably heard of Dell Comics.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It is pretty much standard knowledge now. Dell was the first company to go to 12 cents because they didn't have ads. And they say, yeah, that's what killed them. They went to 12 cents before everybody else. So kids were like, no, I'm going to buy the Marvel, and I'm going to buy the DC, and I'm going to buy the Harvey, and et cetera. Because while Dell has the TV shows, they're 12 cents. So I can't get as many of those for $1.
Yeah.
And it's weird how that happens. It's also, to me, one of the things about the collected editions is that when DC got into it, by the mid 90s, they were a powerhouse, making tons of money, even though their comic sales were number two. Because, oh, look, here are all these Sandman books that are selling. Here are all these Batman books that are selling, and on and on and on. So you get in to buying collected editions in the early 90s. Do you remember what your first omnibus was?
Oh, yeah. Uncanny X-Men. Because
and when did you decide I need a book that big?
Okay, so I think I've shared a story on my channel before, but so what happened was I avoided the first one. I avoided the Fantastic Four Volume 1, and I avoided Ultimate Spider-Man, the Barnes & Noble exclusive, which was kind of like they're testing the waters to see if books that big could sell in the book market. I thought, wow, what a really cool idea. But at that time, I was still getting single issues, so we're looking at 2002. No, that was probably 2003. So about 2003, I was still getting single issues heavily, and then I started getting trade paperbacks in 2000. Well, I started getting trade paperbacks in 2002 to kind of play catch up, but not everything was available, as you know, back then. So
Right.
Then in 2003, I started seeing a change. I started seeing that 6-issue story arcs were now immediately being collected in trade paperback format about a month after the release of that 6th issue. And I didn't know that there was any kind of plan from Marvel or DC to write for trade. I didn't know anything about that. I just knew I had just taken a break from comics for about 8 years or so. I came back. It was kind of hard to find some of the single issues. And then, hey, there's a series of trade paperbacks. Not everything, but most of it. So when the Omnibus came out, the Uncanny X-Men Volume 1, that was the one that I said, I like X-Men. I have all those issues. I don't need that book. But wouldn't it be nice not to pull out every single issue and not to get a bunch of trade paperbacks? And I used to have the Marvel Masterworks, and I ended up selling them years ago. But I just wanted everything in one sitting. So even then, I did not. November of 2003, I think, whatever year that it came out, Uncanny 1. It was only out for a couple of months, and then there was a local record and comic book store, not local, but about an hour from me. And I went in there, and they had a used copy of it. And they were having a 50% off whatever the used price was, which was, I think, $50. So it was $25. And I said,
oh, geez.
Dude, I was like, that I can do. That I can do. It's still up there. Like, I haven't replaced it with any of the new printings. It's very special to me. I have it signed by some folks that are unfortunately no longer with us, but at $25. But the problem with that is that opened up a floodgate of stupidity.
Oh, yeah.
because no matter how much you swear up and down, okay, I got this for cheap, I'm sticking to X-Men. But then they announced an Amazing Spider-Man. And I was like, I love Peter Parker growing up. I sold most of my single issues. Be nice to start from the beginning. You know what? Okay. X-Men and Spider-Man, and that's it. And then they did New X-Men. And I'm like, I'm not doing any modern stuff. I'm doing the classic. But it'd be nice to sit and read all of Grant Morrison's story of New X-Men. I really like their stories, ups and downs. But I think it'd be really nice, like in a big book, in a big tome. So I'll get it's X-Men, so that counts, right? Loopholes. It's X-Men, it still counts. And then they made an announcement. For the first time ever, they were reprinting a book. And remember, I told you I didn't get Fantastic Four, which was their very first one. And I didn't get it because I was still on the fence. Too big, too expensive. But when they reprinted Fantastic Four Volume 1, I saw that with Volume 2. So they were smart, right? They announced Volume 2, reprint Volume 1. I'm like, I can't say no to that. I can't say no to the Marvel's first family and omnibus. I'm in. Okay, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and X-Men, and that's it. And that's all she wrote.
Yeah. Now, my origin story on omnibuses is different because for me, it's like, that's just too expensive. It's too expensive. I won't do it until they announced Amazing Fantasy.
Oh, the classic stuff. Okay.
And I went, there is no way I'm going to be able to afford those ever. They've never put them out as a trade paperback.
Mm-mm.
There's no other way I'm going to get these Ditko stories and these Kirby stories. There's no other way. Fine. I can get it from this online retailer at 48% of cover price. Fine. And I fell in love with the format, and then it would be, there's no way I'm going to be able to get blah, 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 blah. And then there was a time when, I think it was like late aughts, 2008, 2009, something like that. And Marvel and DC just dumped their inventory. So you were seeing them on eBay for, half price. You were seeing them on online retailers, half price. It's like, well, I better snap these up because they're never going to be this cheap again. And then the bug hit, and it's now I just go through and go, okay, did I like that story? Am I ever going to read it again? Yeah, I guess I better get it. But I still drool the most at the ones like the Kirby Romance and War book. That was when I looked at and went, there are like 10 of us in the world who want that book. I gotta buy it.
Well, I mean, and that's one of those books that, now that I know a lot more about this medium, like that's just one of those books that's going to be rare anyway.
Oh,
the demand to reprint that book is going to be near like 10 of you, right? The demand to reprint that compared to something like Fantastic Four 1, Spider-Man 1, it's going to be zero.
Right.
So to have that in your collection, that's a book that more than likely will not be reprinted in the next 2 decades. If that. I mean, there has to be a reason, and I can't imagine them reprinting something like that.
And again, it's how else am I going to get these stories?
Yeah, I was like that with the Ditko Suspense.
Oh, those 2 Ditko books.
Yeah, beautiful books. The Kirby Monster Bus. Oh my gosh, I had to get those.
Yeah.
And I know there's gonna be some double dipping, but I didn't care. I was just like, oh, these are beautiful. I have to get these.
Yeah. So now you've turned from being a fan to someone who makes their living talking about funny books.
Yeah, it's insane.
Living the dream.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? First off, congratulations. I've been podcasting for 13 years, and we break even and are able to go out to dinner a few times on our profits.
First of all, I am very blessed. I don't know. It wasn't. I will be honest. It wasn't easy. It was heartbreaking. So I had a podcast too. Back in 2005, 2006, all the way to 2008, we used to have a podcast. And so I've always been interested in producing things. And my friends and I used to goof around when we were young and make funny movies. My goal in life, I'll be honest with you, was to make beer commercials. That's all. I didn't want to make movies. I didn't want to do anything artsy. I'm like, I just want to make beer commercial, guys. Everybody else was like, I want to be some Hollywood director. I want to write this magnificent screenplay. I'm like, I just want to make people laugh and make a funny beer commercial. But what ended up happening was I had the channel for about two and a half years, and it's one of those things, how you put a lot of content out there, and you know that it's ups and downs when you do this. You put a lot of yourself out there. Sometimes it feels like nobody's watching, and then sometimes you question yourself, why am I still doing this? A lot of that came, but I kept pushing through, and eventually a couple of publishers reached out to me. I also used to review manga for a magazine back in the early aughts, all the way to 2006, when the magazine, unfortunately, print just kind of went dead around that time for magazines. But some of them started reaching out to me about sending in books for review. One of them, luckily, was Dark Horse, because they started publishing the Berserk Deluxe editions, and the lady that was in charge remembered me, and she's like, are you the same Omar that used to write for Beckett Anime Magazine? And I was like, yes. Can I send you a deluxe Berserk Volume 1? It'll be an advanced copy. And I was like, yes. That is my number one most anticipated book of that decade. So after that, I kept making the content. So in 2020, by then I had been doing the channel about 3 years. and I was doing some breaking news for Marvel. David Gabriel reached out to me back in 2019, or maybe it was 2018. Oh my goodness, time just flies. In 2020 is when I lost my job, like a lot of us here, all over the world. With the pandemic, we lost contracts and could not keep my team together. So in June of 2020, I lost my job. And I've been doing IT for 20 years. That was my career. That was everything I knew since I was 23 years old. So everything I've known was IT. And I was a project manager. And during that time, that summer, from June all the way until September, I couldn't find anything. And it got to the point where you do something for so long, and the problem is that your wages are so high, nobody wants to hire you.
Right.
People want to hire, you know how this works, in the industry. They want to hire somebody. Yeah, sure, they have less experience, but we can pay them a lot less. And that's what happens. You get too old in the field, no matter what, people don't want to pay you. So I was in this state. Oh man, it was horrible. I was depressed. I couldn't find anything. Like, I couldn't even find something at my wife's job, like, because they had decided to go with another company instead of hiring me. I was destroyed. I was a wreck. So I was looking at doing contract work. Now I have a family. I have 2 little girls, and they were under my insurance plan. And none of the contract work that I was being offered gave me insurance. Because, live in America, you have to have health insurance. It's just, it's just a thing. So I was like, I can't just go to Texas anymore. We're in Kentucky. If I was in my 20s and single, of course I would take this offer, but I can't. So the only calls I was getting was for level 1 positions. And even, that was, oh my gosh, you're talking about starting over. That was like taking a pay cut by, oh wow, it was insane. It was like 60%. So in the background, I kept making videos every day because it would make me feel better. Like, to talk about comics, to talk about fictional characters, and I didn't have to worry about how I'm going to put food on the table when unemployment runs out. How I was stupid and I should have asked for the freaking COVID extra payment, but I was being honest. I was just like, no, I'm sure another family needs that. I don't need it, but I should have done it because everybody else apparently was doing it. And I just decided to escape and keep doing that. And I noticed the growth on the channel because it was the pandemic and there were a lot of people home. So they were very interested in like these collected editions that I was showing on my channel. And where I had Marvel's ear and where I had the contact at Marvel, they were seeing books from their childhood being made. So by October, I was looking at the numbers, and my wife and I decided, if we change some things and we add a Patreon, I think I can actually make what I'm being offered as a level 1 tech, and maybe not even that much, but we can get private insurance for the kids. I think I can do this. Dude, that was not easy. That was am I committing a career suicide?
Yeah.
In stopping to do this and do you? I'm 40. I was 43 at the time. I'll be 45 here in March, and I'm 43. I am not your average YouTube celebrity or whatever they're called, influencer. Most are young kids, 20s, like, living the life, right? I'm just like, I have to worry about insurance and my family. Is this the right decision? And I'll never forget, I was talking to a really good friend of mine, my buddy Frank, who said, look at it this way, man. You give it a try, and if it fails, it fails, right? But at least you tried. And then you can go work like the rest of us, poor schmoes. Go back to the workforce. But at least you can remember that time that you gave it your all and you tried. Or you could not try and then think about that one time that you could have done something and look back 20 years from now when you're retiring from God knows wherever and think and regret that you didn't give it a shot because you were scared. And I thought about that for about a week. I kept going back and forth, like, what will my kids think of me? And he said, you kids, that's a great lesson to show your kids that if you put your passion and love into something and you don't give up, I mean, is there a better lesson for them to learn? So, yeah, I did. So we changed things up in January of 2021, and I've been doing it full time since then. Not a lot has changed because I was making videos every day back in 2020 and I had a full-time job, but a lot more pressure, right? I don't have a full-time job. This is it. Something happens, this is it. So it's not as glamorous, and I don't want to make it sound like it was as glamorous as it's, because I am very lucky that I get to do it for a living, but it was not I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go be a YouTuber full time. I wish it would have been like that. It was more like, my life is a wreck. What am I going to do?
The other thing about it also is when you're doing it the way I do it, I have 2 jobs. Well, 3, if we get deep into it. You don't pay attention to the numbers. You're just, you know what? If we make money, cool. If we don't, as long as I'm not losing money, that's cool. I don't chase sponsors. I don't even think of a Patreon. I have that weird thing in my head from radio of, I'm not going to make people pay to listen to me. That would be silly. People aren't going to pay to listen to me. So you don't pay as much attention.
That was like that too.
But then when it becomes your job, then you have to, okay, I have to pay attention to these numbers. I have to pay attention to the metrics. I have to pay attention to who's watching, how long do they watch, when do they tune out, why do they tune out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It becomes a job rather than a outlet.
Correct.
And have you been able to sort of thread that needle of it being a job, but still, when you do your live stuff, when you do your videos, you look incredibly happy. Not just because of your announcements or because of what you're talking about or the people you do the live videos with, but just you're happy about comics and you bring that positivity. So if you are still in the back of your head going, well, if I mention this, you're not showing it.
Oh, thank you. I think I really do think that's from an entertainment or entertainer type of mentality. I will tell you, this is my mentality. The day I got let go, we had a meeting with the board, and we had a meeting with my director, and they let all the managers know, hey, you need to let your teams know. I had to let 28 people know that we were losing our job in about a month or so. I was wearing a suit. I came home, and man, I remember I was like, I need to go out for a drink. I need to forget about things. But I had gotten an email from David Gabriel talking about some books that he wanted me to go ahead and announce. So I said, you know what, screw it. I had a suit on. I was like, I'm not going to change. So I made the announcement with my suit. And that kind of became the staple of announcements now. Like, because people made a joke, like, oh, now every time you got to announce a Marvel Omnibus, you have to wear a suit. And I kind of kept that. And it was all just happenstance that, that was the suit that I wore. Nobody knew. Because my mentality was like, I'd rather make someone's day than have to share with them like all these bad news. Because I feel like we get bad news all the time in life. So my mentality is, let's just record something and make somebody stay happy. Because there's these books that are coming out, whether they're 6 months from now or a year from now, they're coming, and you got something to look forward to, and life doesn't suck as much. So that's kind of my mentality, and that's the way it's been It's always been turn off whatever personal problems I'm having. Sometimes on the Saturday streams, I do talk a little bit about what's going on in my personal life. Like if somebody notices my mom was in the hospital, and in my videos that I pre-record, I don't talk about it. But on the live stream, sometimes, if somebody asks me, and that's honestly how they found out I didn't have a job. I don't lie. So when somebody asks me, like, hey, this was, I think, in September when this happened. Like, so I lost my job in June. I didn't say anything. I never made any quote unquote clickbait videos of, oh no, I lost my job. How am I going to afford all these collections or whatever, I don't know why. Maybe I should have. Probably would have gotten a million hits that way. But I never talked about it until one Saturday. So one of my viewers said, hey, dude, what do you do for a living? How do you afford all this? I looked at my wife and I was like, well, for now, this is what I'm doing for a living. Because I lost my job back in June. So that's kind of how that came about. But yeah, most of the time it's, turn off whatever personal things are happening and, be there to entertain.
Now, you are working with Marvel hand in hand. That could not have come easily, especially when you talk about lawyers involved. One of my, as my fan says, one of my many jobs is I cover professional wrestling for pwinsider.com.
You have a really good voice for it. I can see that or hear it.
Well, I write up the show, and then it's okay on Rampage. Here's what happened. Here was what's good. Here's what's bad, et cetera, et cetera. We do everything we can to be disconnected from them so that we could kind of be impartial.
Mm-hmm.
You, on the other hand, you're not doing news or reviews as much as you're making announcements and having fun, even though it's a lot of work. How did that partnership with Marvel start up?
So it started with, somebody forwarded my video of the free comic book day. I think it was 2019, 2018. I can't remember. It was one of those years. To David Gabriel, the senior vice president of sales and marketing at Marvel. And he watched it and he emailed me, or he sent me a Facebook message. And I had, I think at the time, 5,000 subscribers. And I was like, yeah, all right, whatever. I didn't even reply back because I don't believe things like that. So I didn't reply back. It took me a little bit. I told my wife, and I was like, I'm kind of freaking out. I don't know if this is real or not. So I replied back. And he said, well, hey, why don't we have a phone call? Let's see how we can help each other. And I said, sure. And I still didn't believe it. And I'll be honest with you, man. Even when I was talking to him, we talked for an hour. I was kind of questioning, I was giving him questions. And I thought to myself, I was like, okay, if this guy is not real, wow, did he do a lot of research? Because he's throwing out a lot of names and terminology that not a lot of people use. So it wasn't real until I got that first omnibus in advance. It was the Red Hulk omnibus by Jeff Loeb, and that's when I held it in my hand, I'm like, oh man, it is real. All that email, because he wanted me to announce the return of Annihilation back to print and Peter David's Hulk Volume 1, and because one of the things that he liked about me was the way that I talked to the camera, where and I always I go back to those stories. I'm like, man, why would he still talk to me? Because at one point I was looking at the camera. I'm like, get your crap together, Marvel. On our phone call, I was like, because I knew about the Red Hulk omnibus, I was like, can I ask why there isn't, for example, Peter David Hulk omnibus? Why did you guys go with that crappy Jeff Loeb omnibus for Red Hulk? And he was like, oh, because he's one of my best friends, and figured he needs an omnibus for his friend. I was like, okay, this guy's never gonna talk to me ever again. But no, he liked my honesty.
And one of the things that you do, is that you have a poll every year
Oh yeah, that's coming up actually. Yeah.
for what omnibuses people want and what ones they want reprinted. And
Yes.
the thing that blew me away, because I was watching, and it's okay, he gets press releases from Marvel, didn't know how deep it went, knows his stuff, but then it started to be, all right, 18 out of the 20 on this poll have been printed. All right, all 20 on this poll have been printed, and all 20 on the reprint poll have been reprinted. And it's, you've got Marvel's ear. How did that come about? How did they reach out to you to start that, or was that something that they saw you doing and they grabbed?
Uh, I think it was through a series of suggestions. Like I told them, our first phone call, I said people would love Annihilation to come back to print, or Bendis's Daredevil to come back to print. That would be amazing. It's been out of print for so many years. It would just rock them. And he was like, okay, well, and then he sent me an email. He never said yes. That's the way he always works. He sent me an email going, all right, we're going back to print with Annihilation and the two Bendis Daredevils and Peter David Hulk. Do you want to announce those? I was like, yeah, I would love to. One of the biggest longest running jokes was I made him a bet on Wolverine. See, Wolverine Volume 1 came out 11 years ago, and it didn't really sell that well. So I said, Wolverine is one of the hottest characters at Marvel. This was probably 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago when I had a phone call with him. Why can't you guys reprint Volume 1? And, we talked about how the sales back then weren't that great. I'm like, but there's a different market now. There's a lot of people that are buying these books more and more. And I said, I promise you, if it doesn't sell, you don't ever have to talk to me again. But if it does, if it sells, then we get a Wolverine Omnibus Volume 2, because that's why people buy that, because there's a hope for another volume. And he was like, he didn't say yes. He emailed me later going, okay, I'm no dummy. We're going back to print with Wolverine Volume 1. Let's see what happens. And that thing sold out, I don't know how many times. I think it went through 3 printings. It's currently out of print. And now we have a Volume 4 coming out later this year. So maybe it was a mix of suggesting some books and then seeing, not just BSing and actually seeing what books people wanted, and then actually having them voice what books they wanted, and if the books were selling, then they kept doing it. So I think it was probably a mix of all that.
So if I were to kind of pay you under the table to get Marvel to get together with Doc Vasilero, who, if you've read, you bought the Masterworks. He wrote the introductions to all of the Atlas Age.
Yes.
He's been pestering them to either put out a Venus Masterwork to finish off that series, because they printed all the crappy art and then stopped before they got to the really good art by Joe Manili and John Romita and guys like that, or to make it an omnibus. How much would I have to pay you under the table to get him?
I don't know. When you said it yourself, like, those books have to sell, right?
Yeah.
So in order for something like that to come out, something from that era has to sell, and it sucks. It's heartbreaking to kind of tell people, like, the Golden Age just for Marvel doesn't sell as well as most of the modern age. And it's funny whenever I make an announcement, you can see the people that are upset. It's usually the older crowd. Where's my old Golden Age and Silver Age books? And then the youth gets upset when it's a Silver Age announcement. They're like, nobody wants this old garbage. And I'm in the middle. I just like it all. So I don't know. I'm trying to think of the last Golden Age book that they had besides, what was it? Captain America. Captain America Volume 2? Was that the last one?
Captain America Volume 2, and then Marvel. Marvel not Marvel Comics, but it was they have it as Golden Age Marvel Comics, but it was that for Marvel Mystery Comics Volume 2.
Volume 2, that's right. Those were the last two Golden Age books, and that was 2019, 2020,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, we haven't had any since then.
I'm amazed anytime they print anything older.
Yeah. And
although I will say I'm shocked. I'm shocked they did not do the Atlas Age Heroes, because those three masterworks, slam them together, they've already got all the stats and everything. It's like, okay, here's your Marvel Boy, your Captain America, Submariner, Human Torch from the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like you said, is not a lot of people on that.
Right. And as much as I would love to have every book printed for everybody, it is also a business at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So they have to sell, right? I mean, every year there's 20 angry people that Tomb of Dracula Volume 2 did not get up on the reprint poll, and they start getting fairly upset at the youth. And I'm like, well, yeah, okay, let's say the 20 of us vote for it, and we are the only 20 that buy it. What publisher in their right mind is going to print a book for 20 people? None.
But then you also have to remember back when they were doing essentials. Mm-hmm. It was okay. Sales at Marvel are dropping. We're in bankruptcy now. We're not going to be able to print everything. So they canceled the Tomb of Dracula Volume 1 before it was printed. Then the orders came in, and it was the best-selling essential they'd ever done. They were like, oh, crap, now we got to go to print on it. So in some ways, have there been omnibuses that you thought, oh, this is going to bomb, and surprised you? Like for me, what was it, July 1961? I think it was either July or August 1961. Mm-hmm. I remember on the podcast saying, this book is for me and me alone, and I am amazed we're getting it. And then it's okay, here's a sequel. And then here's a third one. And I'm just amazed that it sold well enough for that. Were there any books that you saw and went, well, yeah, that's going to tank, and they did much better than you thought?
I guess the 1960s, because we have a 1962 and a 1963 coming out this year. So, yeah, man, I guess the 1960s, since they had to have sold well enough to warrant a third omnibus. So maybe those, and I'm trying to think of another one that really, really surprised me. Oh, 100% honest, and I know I'm going to get this might sound blasphemous to a lot of people. Ultimate Spider-Man 1. Ultimate Spider-Man 1 because it failed at Barnes & Noble, and it didn't sell that well the second time. And that's the only one that I worried that when fans voted for it, I was thinking, I don't know. I don't think this is a case of Wolverine. Wolverine's been out of print for 11 years. I hear more people talk about Wolverine, but it took me by surprise how many people bought that. That book went out of print quick. Ultimate Spider-Man 1. It just came back to print. And not just now. I believe it's coming back out in April or May. But I think that was one that I was like, whew, well, that's good. They're getting a volume 2 then. That was good. That one took me by surprise.
There have been a few that took me by surprise, because Thunderbolt's getting a 4th volume. Because I remember after Kurt Busiek left, my friend owned a shop, and we could not give that book away after he left. And then when it turned into Fight Club, it's like, oh, that book is dead, dead man walking. And it's now in an omnibus, and it sold well enough, they're doing another. And it's almost like there's people who discover characters and series as omnibuses that were ignored when they came out originally. And
yes, and because of what sort of popularity of them now, things are so different.
What sort of experience do you have where, you looked at a book when you were a Wednesday Warrior and sort of skipped it, but now that it's an omnibus, you picked it up and you were really surprised? We have some tough questions here.
No, it's okay. It's only tough because I have so many answers. So picking it up for the first time and I was surprised. I think there's some that I missed out on whenever I took a leave of that 1995 to 2002 when I came back to comics. So that era was very, very, like, it was unexplored territory. I had gone back and read some stuff in trades like JMS Spider-Man. So anytime a book from that era pops up, I'm like, ooh, I don't think I've read that. So when I open up an omnibus, it surprises me how well it was written. Garth Ennis's Punisher, I think, is one. The Welcome Back Frank story, the Marvel Knights.
And then there are some stories that have been printed in omnibuses that even if it was given to me for free, I would avoid.
Are you talking about Avengers The Crossing?
Avengers The Crossing.
How dare you, sir? I have a soft spot in my heart for that one.
Really? Explain that to me. Please explain that to me. And I'm not being facetious.
I don't know.
I want to know, because at the time I was mad when it came out. And when it was put in an omnibus,
okay. Not to get into aging yourself, but how old were you when it came out?
I was in my 20s.
Okay, you were in your 20s, and you were just out. Okay, so you had read the classic Avengers stuff, the Roger Stern stuff, moved into the Bob Harras era, which is, I guess, the Bob Harras era, even though he stopped writing it, and then became. But okay, I'll tell you what, it was Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, though. Like, a lot of that stuff was pretty good in there, and a lot of that stuff eventually would become of Bendis's Disassembled, the Avengers Disassembled, and they were just doing it long before he did. Where out of nowhere an Avengers betrays and kills other Avengers. So, man, this one's yeah. Is there a book that somebody? Oh wait, okay, you're gonna hate me because I gave away those Golden Age books.
Okay. I can completely understand that. They are not easy reads.
They are not for me. I kept the Captain America ones for historical value and reading orders, but the Amazing Fantasy, not Amazing Fantasy, the Marvel Mystery Comics, that stuff, I ended up giving those away. I gave away a couple of the other Golden Age books that Marvel sent my way. All my DC Golden Age is gone.
Yeah, now most of what you focus on is Marvel. Do you have an inroad at DC? If people at DC are listening, I'm sorry, we've talked about this a lot. Or is DC's collected edition just decimated? Because to me, as an outsider, it feels like a few years ago, they just went, yeah, these collected editions, they're selling, but we don't want to deal with that, so kill it. In a lot of ways.
I really don't think they are done. I think they're just working on a skeleton crew and doing the best that they can with that crew. And it makes sense, talking to anybody that has ever, my contact over there was Hank, and he was one of the people that got let go in 2020, just when I was beginning to actually have a connection with DC. They were let go. Like, everybody, all my contacts at DC, with the exception of one, is gone. And it's just not that they don't want to keep making books. It's just that they don't have the manpower to do it. And it is a completely different beast over there than it is at Marvel. Marvel's a well-oiled machine. DC is working with, hey, everybody that was working on this project is gone. Here you are, person in another department that had nothing to do with this project.
And it's such a shame because in many ways, DC, especially Vertigo, built the collected edition.
Oh, yeah, they were killing. And I mean, they were killing it back then. right? They had an understanding that one day perhaps people will want these in all-in-one trade paperback. I still think that there is going to be another regime of DC coming back and doing more collected editions. I don't think they've gone anywhere. They've just kind of taken a break, and the catalog is just empty because, well, they're catching up. I really do think they need to hire some people, though, to be in charge of that area, and some people that know what they're doing instead of just handing it down to other departments. So who at this point, I don't know, though. I hope so, because I many times on my channel, whenever I'm asked, why do you review so much Marvel compared to DC? My answer is always the same. Marvel releases 30%. Now it's probably 40% more books than DC. Marvel actually replies back to my emails and contacts me, and we have a good relationship. DC, I just heard back from my contact at DC, 2-3 weeks ago, just to tell me that everything's okay with DC's collected editions department. I haven't heard from him again, and I've asked a couple of questions. It's just, and I'm not holding it against them. It's just that they're busy and they don't have anybody that can make decisions. I don't think like Marvel. It's a different beast. Everybody that has ever worked there has told me that they were not happy with the situation.
And they also have very different corporate masters with a very different agenda.
100%. That is something else some people forget about.
Discovery is cutting costs, whereas Disney is there. What I have heard, Disney is like a benevolent absentee landlord to Marvel.
Yes, that is one thing that happens when I talk to other publishers, is the way that other publishers get books published. I'll just use Dark Horse as an example. Dark Horse, you see Dark Horse, they have Hellboy. They're getting things like The Goon back. They've got Harrow County, and it's kind of a big deal. So people are like, when are they going to release these hardcovers? What they don't realize is they don't have the big corporate money. So what they have to do in order to fund a project is they have to sell one specific hardcover, and in that group, that funds another hardcover. So that money is kind of coming back into the pool of projects. That's what happened with Berserk. They had no idea how well Berserk was going to sell, and Berserk funded the Helsing. I don't know why I forgot. Helsing Deluxe Editions and Blade of the Immortal Deluxe Editions. It's not like a corporate machine is giving the money. Yeah, print what you want to, and if it fails, oh well. But if 10 other books succeed, yay! It has to succeed.
And one other thing Dark Horse does, they've picked up these licenses for other books, the EC library, the Warren stuff. Although Warren is weird in that it may be public domain or not.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Warren because, well, part of Warren, Dynamite has Vampirella.
Yeah,
and then Fury and Creepy are with Dark Horse, but they can't reprint the hardcovers. And let me tell you, as somebody that's missing those hardcovers, that hurts.
Yeah, but you saw they are putting them out as paperbacks, so at least you'll get them.
Have you met me, Chris? I gotta have them in hardcover, man. We've been over this.
I've seen behind you. Yes.
No, I do not. I don't discriminate. I love my trade paperbacks. I always think people are doing a disservice. Like, yes, I realize the omnibus videos do the best, but come on, there's a whole another set of books you could be getting in trade paperback format. You can finish those stories.
Tell me about your Patreon. If somebody goes to your Patreon, what do they get? Why would they give you money?
Why would they give you money? Why are you making me question myself?
They want for free.
Okay, so that is something that I thought about. Like when my wife and I were discussing Patreon, I'm like, why would anybody pay me money? And she's like, well, they're not going to with that attitude. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Okay. We've opened up on our Patreon are different tiers. Some of them are early access tiers to videos, mainly like the breaking news videos. Some of them are getting to vote on certain polls. Like right now, since I'm doing a reprint poll, I actually put up a poll yesterday of what people want to see collected in oversized hardcover into omnibus format for X-Men comics. And I did the same thing last year, and it was Extinction Agenda and Days of Future Present. And it's little polls like that. Then we have like an Ask Me Anything poll, or I mean a tier. We have a recognition tier where your names are added to the end of the credits. And then we have the one-on-one where I consultation with me. And that one's sold out. That one stays sold out. I remember when I started that, I was like, no one's going to pay to talk to me. So it was the first week I had to put a cap on it because I started doing the math. I was looking and saying, oh my gosh, if I do 20 plus more of these, I can't make any videos. This is all I'm going to be doing because I need time to sleep and eat. So I had to like put a cap on it and be like, I limit myself to these many people. And if it sells out, I'm sorry, you have to wait for somebody to leave. That has been amazing. And the people are so amazing. The people that I've gotten to know have been great, helping them out or just even talking to them. So those are the kind of different tiers. They all everything starts at $1. And I think one-on-ones are like $35 now. So it's for 30 minutes. So it's crazy that I get to do this for a living. And you said it, man. And no matter how bad it gets, like, oh gosh, I'll tell you something that happened the other day. I deleted 2 hours worth of footage. Deleted.
Oh,
it was my fault. It was my
fault.
I'm sure as long as you've been doing this, things like this
gives me a headache just to think about.
It was Sunday, so I know my neighbors knew that I did not go to church because I let out the biggest F-bomb. Like nobody was home, but it was my fault, right? That for some reason when it's my fault, I just pick myself up. I'm like, well, I gotta record that again. But all these things are working against you. You have YouTube, you have copyright strikes. Oh, that's another nightmare I could tell you about another day. You have technology that for some reason isn't working. The light isn't working. The microphone is causing static. Why is it causing static? It wasn't causing static yesterday. What's happening? Is there a magnet? All these things, and you work by yourself, and it's a headache. But when you take a step back, you realize you're talking about comics for a living, and oh my gosh, what 15-year-old Omar would do with that information. First of all, he wouldn't go to college and be like, hey man, don't waste your time on that. Go read more comics. It's insane. And it's been a hell of a ride, and I can't imagine doing anything else. I can't ever imagine going back to corporate world. Who knows? Maybe I'll have to one day, but not because I want to.
And that is a chat with the Uncanny Omar. Please go to his YouTube channel. You'll get hooked as well as I did. And whenever that little bell goes off, most of the time when the bell goes off for YouTube, I ignore it. Because it's like, yeah, I'll get to it when I get to it. But when the bell goes off for Omar puts up a new video, I'm very much ooh. I'm going to listen to that while I'm doing work reports or as soon as or over my lunch break or something like that, because he's very entertaining. He's very personable and he knows his stuff. And I really like it. One thing I want to point out, since that interview, Doc V has announced that Fantagraphics is going to be publishing 6 books over the next few years of Atlas comics, much like his Atlas at War book, one of which is going to be The Complete Venus. So Marvel's not going to print it, but we're going to get it anyway. And a little while after the interview, I actually emailed Omar when I found out, because I'm friends with Doc V on Facebook and have been since the early days of Yahoo groups, and we were both just kind of shocked and happy that this stuff is going to get reprinted. I do other podcasts. I do the main one, The Mothership, Crazy Comics and Stories, which episode 600 landed just this week. We've got 2 more in the can, and then Free Comic Book Day. I take the little recorder that I'm holding in my hot, sweaty hands right now and record Joe, Butch, and I wandering around the Twin Cities and up to St. Cloud, Minnesota, looking for comics. Those will be our fill-in episodes when Joe's not able to record, or if something happens. So that gives me more stuff to edit. Ugh. I also, over on pwinsiderelite.com, every Wednesday, I record the AEW Dynamite Post Show Party, where myself and Anthony Pyrus, we go over AEW Wrestling's premiere show, their flagship show, AEW Dynamite. I also write up other wrestling shows. I always write up AEW, so I got AEW Dynamite, AEW Rampage. I also will cover Women of Wrestling and the National Wrestling Alliance when my schedule allows. We've got a new AEW show starting this summer on Saturdays, AEW Collision, and I record audio for them. You need to be a subscriber, but if you are at all interested in wrestling, they are the premier wrestling website with news and opinions. And when they print news, it's not a theory they have, it's not one sided. They double check their sources, unlike some of the other wrestling news with the Z sites. I also have other web podcasts that I've done in the past. I am desperately trying to get them up and running again, but there's only so much time in the day, kids. Only so much time in the day. Well, I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for checking this out, and I will be back soon with more stories.